Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to it. I'm Allistair McCaw. In this episode of What It Takes, I have Casey Stoney. Casey is an English professional football manager and former player who is the head coach of Manchester United women's football team. A versatile defender, she was capped more than 100 times for the England women's national football team since making her debut in 2000. She also was an integral part of the England teams which reached the UEFA Women's Euro 2009 final and the quarterfinals of the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2007 and 2011. In 2012, Stoney replaced Faye White as the England captain and also became captain of the newly formed Team GB squad for the 2012 London Olympics. She ended her playing career at Liverpool Ladies and was appointed the first team head coach of the newly formed Manchester United women on the 8th of June 2018. Now, in this really cool conversation with Casey, we get into her playing days, what the highlights were her for a player, who her greatest influences were, what motivated her to have such a long career at the top, also what she misses the most from the game, and the transition from being a player to coaching. Also, seeing that Casey was the captain of the England national team, I asked her what she feels makes a good captain or leader. We also get into self-development. I asked her how she invests in herself daily. Also have some fun questions at the end. And of course, she answers the questions that you guys sent in on social media. Big thanks for doing that. So without further ado, I know you guys will enjoy this one. Here is Casey Stoney. Hi, Casey. Welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Hi, Alistair. It's lovely to be on and it's great to speak with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. First of all, how have the last 2 months been for you, especially with the COVID-19 situation?
Obviously, it's been a challenge for all of us. I think for me as an individual, obviously used to working, going out every morning, have a schedule every day. To be, effectively stuck indoors for 10 weeks is very difficult. We've got 3 young children that we're obviously aren't at school at the moment, so trying to look after them, make sure that they're emotionally stable, happy and looked after, but also try and run a football club. So yeah, do you know what? I've had some days where I've been fed up, but most of the time try to focus on what I can do rather than what I can't, trying to make sure that I really enjoy this time with my children, because I'm never ever going to get this length of time ever again, and make sure they're happy. And also it's a great opportunity in time to be able to reflect on, I've never stopped like this in my life, if I'm honest. I didn't even stop like this when I retired. So to be able to look back on how I've transitioned from playing into coaching, also how I've tried to build a team from nothing, and how I can still improve as a head coach and as a person.
Let me ask you, what's more difficult, managing 3 kids or managing a football team?
Managing 3 kids, definitely.
Yeah, no. That was definitely one of the questions I wanted to ask you. You're obviously the manager of Manchester United Ladies. You also have a lot of other commitments, and now being a full-time mom at home as well. It must be it's like juggling 10 balls, I think.
Yeah, and you know what I learned for the first 2 weeks, I just felt guilty about everything, because I was like, I'm not getting all my work done that I need to do. Then maybe I'm not looking after the kids the way that I need to. And I'm not, and I couldn't split myself. And I actually read this thing was like, there's 3 jobs. Trying to, be a head coach is a job. Trying to be a parent is another job. And trying to homeschool to be a teacher is another job. And actually what I did was just stop giving myself a hard time. And, as long as they're reading and writing every day, I'm keeping up with my emails and touching base with my players and my staff, which is really important, because that communication during this time and staying connected is so important. And just not feeling guilty if I don't get something done on that day, that I can get it done early in the morning or late at night. Because when they say work at home if you can, I don't think they realise that it's pretty impossible when you've got 3 kids.
Well, you see, that's something that struck me. we obviously met for a cup of tea, of course, in England. If it's here in America, it's going to be coffee. But we had a cup of tea last September, I think it was. And the first thing that struck me about you is that, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a perfectionist or near perfection, and everything has to be, done with the best ability. I think that's something that shines through in your personality. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I am, and it's probably, I'd say it's a strength but a flaw at the same time, because you can strive for perfection, but I don't think you can often ever achieve it. And sometimes they're the things that keep you up at night and keep you drive for higher standards all the time. But there's sometimes when you need to just be okay with just giving yourself a break and saying, I prioritize what I need to do right now. And do you know what? This has been amazing for me, this experience, because I've had to delegate. I've had to let things go. I can't be a perfectionist in these circumstances because I don't know what's happening. No one knows what's happening. So it's been a great learning experience for me as a person to almost let go a little bit, because I'm a perfectionist. I do tend to control everything so that I make sure it's done the way I want it done. Whereas now I've trusted my staff, and they've been fantastic and stepped up and made sure that everything's running smoothly. And it can't be perfect all the time, and actually sometimes chaos is a good thing, because under pressure you have to think differently.
No, exactly. I mean, but that's one of the traits I've picked up in high performers, is that they are all perfectionists. And the only thing one of the things that derail them are, controlling that perfectionism. Because just as you said there, perfectionism isn't achievable. Excellence maybe is, but that's something I've picked up with observing the high performers, that they're all perfectionists or very, very near perfectionists. Their biggest challenge is in how to control that perfectionism,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I say, and you've got to realise that not everybody who you either work with, work for, or who's playing under you might not be perfectionists. So it's how you control it, how you then impart that on other people, and what you show and what you keep to yourself really is really important. Because, yes, my standards are really high, my attention to detail is really high, but then my players don't necessarily need that from me all the time. My staff don't need that from me all the time. So it's just working out my players and staff as people, really. What are their drivers? What are their motivations, to make sure that I'm ticking the right boxes for them?
Yeah. Now, obviously, yesterday it came out with the news that the Women's Super League is obviously cancelled for the season. How do you feel about that?
Obviously, massively disappointed, because we had so many more opportunities to develop and grow. We still had Chelsea, Arsenal and Man City to play, who are all in the top three. So we've missed out on those tests and those experiences to develop. And obviously we've missed out on a lot of game time and opportunities to train and develop the players and ourselves and me as a head coach to continue to grow and develop. But I have to say it was the right decision. We've been in this situation now for 10 weeks. We've been constantly trying to look at how we can return. And I think financially, logistically, and obviously resource-wise, the women's game's in a very different place to the men's. And what we can't do is risk players or staff safety in any way.
Yeah. Tell me about the players. I mean, obviously they've been keeping busy with programs and everything for the last 10 weeks. How's that been? How have you been able to keep them accountable?
Well, obviously, I think it's been a huge challenge, but I think what we have done at Manchester United is we've become, the players are, self-efficient. So when they get set a program, they're capable of doing it. We don't spoon-feed them. They are very engaged in their own programs. They have input into their own individual development plans. And obviously, what we do at club, I think, has enabled them to really cope during this 10 weeks. We have had WhatsApp groups set up for training, so they report all of the training sessions, their RPEs, how they're feeling. We've had
was that daily? Would you check in with them daily?
Daily, yeah. So they fill in their wellness as well, how they're feeling, muscle fatigue, tiredness, RPEs. Also, we had a well-being group set up as well, so that the players ran that. We have some cultural leaders. They ran the well-being group, set up tasks where they're just trying to get to know each other on a deeper level, despite not being together. So it was, drawing pictures of something that was important to them, and then players having to guess who that person was. And also what we recognised during this time is that if anything was going to be affected, it would be their mental well-beings.
Mm-hmm.
So our well-being coach set up 2 surveys a week just to kind of keep a check on everybody, how they were feeling. We had cooking tasks. So each week a player would pick a country, and then everybody in the team had to cook a dish from that country.
Oh, wow.
We kept it all competitive as well. So we played for We played for points on everything, and then we had obviously competitive tasks in training. And we also had 2 web calls with them every single Tuesday and Friday, and we'd try and ask them what they've been up to, check in if they're okay, get all the staff to speak as well, and just make sure everyone was okay, and also have a lot of clear communication and clarity on the information that was coming back from the Football Association on the league, because like I said, the players want clarity, they want to know what they're working towards, and just being really open and transparent with them. And I have to say that they were outstanding. You know, they really applied themselves. Their programs, you know, were adapted and changed. We got a lot of equipment out to them as well, so they could train efficiently on their own. And I think it bodes well really for the future, because it means that, you know, they are capable of training and driving themselves without anybody there to motivate them.
Now, Casey, as a player, you had an incredible career. You were capped more than 100 times for your country. You captained the national squad. You captained Team GB to the 2012 Olympics, and you played for Liverpool Ladies. What would you say were the highlights for you as a player in your career?
I think, if I'm honest, when I was growing up as a little girl, you kind of didn't even see women. So we call it football, and you guys probably call it soccer, anywhere. So I think a highlight, I never dreamed that I'd be able to play at Wembley, and to play at Wembley in a home Olympics and to lead my team out. And I think there was over 72,000 people in the stadium that day. Wow. That probably was one of the defining moments for me, because I was never, ever the best player in any of my teams. What I did was I worked really hard at what I had, you know, and that was for me a big moment. We beat Brazil 1-0 and obviously took us through to the quarterfinals. And then I think another highlight for me, obviously, would be my first ever England cap, because I think it's probably the biggest honour you can ever receive, is getting your first call up and then actually going out there and pulling on that shirt and playing. And then I think that really sparked the fire in me to want to do it over and over again.
Who were some of the influences on your career? Players or coaches, people?
I think I always go back to probably my mum when I was really young, because when I was kind of 10 or 11, it wasn't the done thing to play football. And, you know, I got a little bit of grief at school and people said girls shouldn't play. And my mum was always like, listen, you've got a talent, go and use it. Make sure you never quit. Don't give up. And she was like that through my whole career. I think in terms of players, Kelly Smith was an absolute idol of mine. I ended up playing in the same team as her, and she was just so super talented. You know, I thought she was probably one of the best players I've ever played with and played against in the world. And she played the game like it should be played. And I always wanted to try and emulate that. I was just never good enough, to be honest. And then coaching wise, I had 2 real kind of coaches that I think I didn't really get coached when I was really young. We just played. And it wasn't until I went to England and Hope Powell was the England coach when I started actually getting coached. And, you know, her detail on the pitch was terrific in terms of actual detail, in terms of on the grass, learning my role and my responsibilities, and the way she changed the women's game around. And then there was a guy at Charlton called Keith Bonus, and he taught me that actually when you care about somebody, you probably get more out of them. And you know, I built a good relationship with him. He gave up a lot of time and effort to try and improve me and believe in me. And, you know, I'll never forget that.
What motivated you to have such a long career at the top? I mean, you almost quit the game in 2005, but obviously you carried on playing. Thank goodness. But what motivated you to have such a long career?
I think number one, it was my love of the game. I love football. I loved going out to train and play and just be in a team. And I genuinely loved the game. So that was probably one of my biggest motivations. And then I don't know if it was fear or stubbornness once I nearly quit and I actually got my shirt, I was never, ever going to give it up. And you're always, and I had a fear of looking over my shoulder and going, right, you're not going to take my shirt because I'm going to work harder than you. I'm going to outthink you. I'm going to do all the things you're not going to want to do because that's how I keep my shirt. And I knew that, I had a talent. I probably wasn't as good as other players, but I knew that I had the attitude and the work ethic to outwork them. And I always think if I miss a session, you're doing a session. So I'd never miss a session because I would never wanted to fall behind. And I think I always got up and I loved what I did. I really did. And I wanted to be the best I could possibly be. And I also wanted to prove people wrong. People that thought I couldn't make it and didn't have the talent. I think there's my stubbornness coming out. And no matter what I do, to be honest, I want to learn. I want to be the best. I want to be the best version of me in anything that I do. And I wanted to, there were many times when I could have walked away. There were many times I had so many setbacks, but I actually believe all of those setbacks were the making of me because they were the ones that gave me the fuel to really kind of just kick on and do even more, to work harder, to make sure that I was ahead of the game.
If you could go back to the beginning, let's say when you made your England debut in 2000, what would you have done differently with what you know today? What would you have maybe told yourself?
I would have probably told myself earlier that I needed to work harder. It wasn't until I had a setback really that I really kind of kicked on. I needed to work harder from the offset. And most importantly, I probably needed to believe in myself. Because I think if you believe, I always say, it doesn't matter what else happens, you have to believe in yourself because there might not be anyone else that believes in you. You can't rely on anyone else's belief. And it probably took me till 2007 when I actually won International Player of the Year to actually feel like I was good enough to be at England. And that's not a good place to be when you're going out in a World Cup and you're thinking, should I even be here? So I think that gave me the confidence and the belief to perform. So I just think it was hard work and belief. If I could tell myself those two things, work hard from the start. Don't wait until someone drops you or leaves you out. Don't give them the opportunity to do that. And then, believe that you've got enough that you can perform at the highest level.
What do you miss most about being a player?
Just the game, just playing the actual game. I join in sometimes in training, but not a lot. I try and avoid it. Just lacing my boots up and going out and playing. And I'm a competitor, like board games at Christmas. I'm terrible if I lose. Just playing to win, and that feeling of competing is probably what I miss most. It's a different feeling now as a head coach than it was as a player, but knowing you can go out there and you can actually influence a game and you can get on the ball, and there's nothing better than winning in a team and sharing that moment with your teammates and the people that have got you there.
The transition from player to coach, how was that? What were the challenges for you?
Obviously it's not easy. I think the first transition you're doing is retiring, which is absolutely terrifying, because when you retire you lose probably your identity, possibly your entire income overnight, and you don't know what you're going to do. So I was lucky in terms of transitioning into my role with Phil, but I'd kind of set myself up for that. I've been coaching since I was 16. I've been a head coach before. I've been looked after academy programs, and I've coached for every club that I've been at because I wanted to make sure that I was prepared when I retired. And I love coaching. I really enjoy the game. The biggest challenges for me were kind of, I have to say, like laying boundaries, because some of these people I'd played with, some of these people I'd played against, and I wasn't always the nicest person on the pitch because, like I said, I always wanted to win. And making sure that they knew that I was going to be the boss from now on. I was going to be the head coach. I was going to have difficult conversations with them. I was potentially going to drop them, leave them out. I'm deciding on contract. So, I really removed myself and laid the boundaries from the start, which was, it was a challenge, but obviously some of them were my friends, so I had to distance myself a little bit in that way. And
do you think that's important, Casey, to set your standards very, very early, to set those boundaries?
Absolutely, because I think I can always come back in a little bit if I need to. I think if you don't set those boundaries and you try to go the other way, it's virtually impossible. So, I think those boundaries had to be set from the start. I'd probably been, transitioning in my role a little bit through being captains, and also I was in the leadership group at England, and I spoke to the manager quite a lot, and he leaned on me quite a lot at England as well. So that transition had happened a little bit previously. Probably the biggest challenge is the loneliness, if I'm honest, because you're not a teammate anymore. You're being a manager and a head coach is sometimes a very lonely place to be, because you are making the decisions. It does fall on you. You've got to have the difficult conversations. You've got to drop people. You've got to leave people out. You've got to pick the team. So for me, it was a huge challenge in terms of that, and just saying it's on me now. But I'm okay with it. It was a challenge, but I think I've adjusted. I think also I had to try and build an entire squad and staff within 4 weeks. So that in itself was a real challenge when I got the job at Manchester United. But yeah, I think it's just adjusting, and you know, I'm super, super critical of myself as well. So any poor performance is always a reflection on me.
You spoke about having the hard discussions. If you could give some advice to other coaches out there on how to handle the tough conversations, what would you suggest?
I think number one, you have to have them. Do not avoid them. And the most important thing for me is be clear on what your honest message is, because as a player, I always said, I just want honesty. I might not always like what you're going to say to me, but I'll respect you if you're honest with me. And I don't avoid the honest conversations. Do I like having them? No, I don't think anyone does. But they are the key for me and the foundations for trust with my players, with my staff. But to have them honest conversations, you've got to build a relationship first. So if that person knows you care about them first and foremost, and you care about their future, you care about where they want to go, you care about their journey and them as a person, it's easier to have the honest conversation because it's coming from the right place with the right intent. And then you support them out the other side of it. So I think honesty is key. Building relationships with your personnel is key. And don't try and avoid it, because by trying to please someone in that moment, in 6 months' time, it's going to come back and bite you anyway. And you're not helping yourself to grow your environment and your culture. So honesty is key. Care is massive. But then support has to be there for them. So if I'm leaving a player out, it's my job then to help them to have every chance to get back in the team again. If that means putting extra sessions on for them, if it means extra meetings, looking at analysis, that's my job to do that.
I always go by the PPTT, which is the right place with the right person at the right time with the right tone. Yeah. You know, to have those type of tough conversations. I think that I always go by the PPTT: place, person, time, tone. But absolutely, like you said at the beginning there, it's so important to have those tough conversations. And I think, in my opinion, of obviously consulting and what I do, it's one of the biggest challenges to a lot of coaches, because it goes against their personality in the way they don't like confrontation. But it's so important. You need healthy confrontation in leadership.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think if you know your personnel, the person you're talking to, I think then you know what tone you can use, what tone will be received better, and how you make sure that message is clear. So I think you're absolutely right. And it's you have to have them, and players, and I want an environment where players are having them with each other, because then you're in a great place.
Yeah. Now, you were the assistant coach to Phil Neville at the England ladies before taking up the role at Manchester United. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was great. Obviously, it was my transition, in terms of playing. I was in the England fold as a player for 18 years, so to then put on a different colour was a bit strange. But I think the players, the biggest compliment was the players said that it seemed so natural for me. So it was a good experience. A new manager coming in with new ideas, new ways of doing things, and obviously looking at trying to connect with the people more. Obviously, he's had vast experience from the men's game. So he was coming in with that. So I was really keen to kind of pick his brains on the differences and how he's new to the women's game. It was key for me to support him in them first couple of months in terms of the amount of knowledge I had in the women's game and the players, and try and impart that knowledge into him so that, he had the best chance to be successful, trying to find out what he wanted from a number two. what I could do to facilitate between him and the players, what I could do to take the load off him, but also knowing that I was kind of new in the journey as well, so I was going to have a lot of learning to do myself.
Let me ask you, what do you look for in a player? And what are the important qualities for, you as a coach? What do you look for in a player?
I think when I'm looking at players, first and foremost, work ethic, it has to be there, because I think if they have got the work ethic, they'll always work to improve. So if they've got a little bit of talent, great, fantastic. They have to have talent at the top level anyway. That's kind of a fundamental, but the work ethic is key. I think being open-minded is really important, because then they are coachable. And they will then hopefully engage in their own journey. And I think they have to have a hunger and desire, because I think if you want to get to the top, it takes an awful lot to get there. And then to stay there, it's even harder. So I look for work ethic, open-mindedness, and a hunger to achieve, really, is the three key fundamental things for me. But I'm also looking heavily at character as well, because I think if you don't have the right characters in your team, it can cause you a lot of problems.
Now, you also captained the England squad. So in your opinion, what makes a great captain or leader?
I think it's someone that's honest. I think it's someone that can influence others to go with them on the journey. And I think it's someone that drives standards every single day. I think the minute your captain doesn't do that, you've got a problem, or your leader doesn't do that, you've got a problem. And those standards have to be driven in everything you do. And it's someone that can engage a large amount of people, and that they can share their vision, they can buy into it, and they'll go with them on that journey. And someone that can, I think, support and guide. As a captain, it's sometimes you are the go-between between the manager and the players, and that's a difficult place to be, but you've got to be able to put shoes on from both, and you've got to be able to make sure that you are the connection in those roles, and also realizing you're not always going to get it right, but that your job is to support ultimately as a captain the players, but also it's your job to sometimes make sure that you are the go-between with the manager as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I get to visit lots of teams and colleges and so on and so forth, and that's one of the first questions I ask coaches is, who are your leaders? And because you look at the successful teams, of course, like Manchester United in the early 2000s. I mean, they had a bunch of leaders in the locker room. I mean, Roy Keane, Rio Ferdinand, obviously Gary Neville. I mean, they had 4 or 5 very, very strong personalities in there. And obviously Alex Ferguson in his book talks about the importance of having leaders in the locker room.
I think it's so important. I always say that the locker room's theirs, it's not mine. And if you can have strong leaders, they lead it for you. And you have leaders that can challenge each other. You have leaders that drive standards, and it's our role as coaches to create an environment where leaders can come out and shine, because I think we're guilty of saying these days, well, we're just not producing leaders, but actually are we creating things through the pathways when they're younger, where they take responsibility, where they have a role, where they have to lead in some different ways? If we don't give them opportunity, how do we know? So and everyone leads in different ways, and we do a lot of different tasks away from the grass where people have to lead, and we learn an awful lot about them as people, as characters, and those that sometimes might not lead on the grass but lead in different ways off the grass.
Interesting. Would you say that you're born a leader or made a leader? Because I can hear, obviously listening to your story, and from a young age you already had those leadership qualities. Would you say that leadership is born or made?
Do I sit here as someone who I think I was a born leader. I don't think I was made. I think it was always in me. I think I was always that character. But I think sometimes you can support people through leadership, and you can actually make people better leaders by the way you engage them, the tasks that you put on in your environment, giving them responsibility and seeing how they take it. And some people won't. Some people won't come to the floor, but some people will. So I think there's an element of it being natural in you, but I also think you can bring out leadership in people in different ways too.
Now, as mentioned earlier, we had a most enjoyable chat in Manchester when I was there last year. And we obviously spend a lot of time talking about team culture. So, in your opinion, what makes for a great team culture?
Well, we're still working towards it, and we'll always be working to create a great team culture. I don't think, in the 22 months that we've been in, we're where we want to be, but I would say having a shared vision is really important, and that higher purpose that you're always working towards. And I think it's really important that everybody is involved in that process and buys into it. I think having shared values, which then influence your daily behaviours, is really important. I think to have an environment where you are, having difficult conversations and they're going on between staff and players. I think that's really important. I think a culture of high standards is crucial for me. I think if you want to achieve anything, your standards have to be very, very high all over in terms of on and off the grass. But having with that, I think there has to be an element of accountability. That doesn't necessarily mean a fine system, but I think there has to be an accountability that if your standards are dropped or you're below the line, then that you're in an environment where people call you up for that, and people say that this isn't who we are, this is what we represent, this is where the standards we need to be at. But also along with that, I think there always needs to be humility. There's nobody in our team that's not too big to do the small things, and to make sure that we are all in it together. And I think that for me is they're the kind of the fundamentals really that we try and aim towards. We engage the players in all the conversations we have around the vision, goal setting, the values that we set, and then
do you set standards and values together as a team, or is that just coming from the leaders, the coaches?
That's the whole team set that. The whole team set the values, and they were set in year one. And now, I was asked a question by a player, should we change these? Are they relevant? I said, no, we don't change them. We get the people, and we fit the people. We do recruitment based around these values. We want people to fit our values. We want people to come in now. And sometimes they're not always going to be perfect on all the areas. It's up to us to support them, So if there are elements where we say, right, one of our things is being selfless, that's sometimes difficult when you're not playing. So how do we support them to still think about the team, to make sure the team's at the forefront of their mind when maybe, as an individual, they're struggling. So, we have to be supportive, but we have to be accountable if those standards are dropped and our values aren't being met.
In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges and threats in building a great team culture?
Bad eggs. Staff, players. If you've got not the right characters in your team, you're going to have trouble, because if they don't have those values and they don't, you've got people causing problems all the time, and I just think it doesn't work. I'm a big believer in, if you've got bag eggs, you need to get them out as quick as possible, because they can be really, really detrimental to your environment. Yes, you can support them, you can try and make a difference, but the minute you realise that you can't make that difference, or the team can't make that difference, they have to go. I think another one is me as the leader dropping my standards. If I drop my standards, I think that's a real threat to our culture and environment in terms of our work ethic and where we want to go. And also not having the ability to call people up when they're not obviously adhering to the values, the standards, and what we're trying to achieve. Because if you just keep letting things go and you don't tell people, because some people don't actually know when they're doing something, they're not even be self-aware. So it's your responsibility to give them feedback, to tell them that they're not meeting the required standards. And I would expect my staff to do exactly the same to me.
Now, Casey, you're obviously someone that heavily invests in herself. Could you give us some examples of how you grow, but not only as a coach and manager, but as a person?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm continually striving to learn. I think I only know 1% of football, so there's 99% to learn. And I think if I think about, I'm on my pro license at the moment, so I'm really kind of testing myself in a challenging environment to learn more about the game on and off the pitch. I'll go and watch other coaches where I can. I listen to podcasts as much as I can around coaches and leadership. I read leadership books quite a lot, because I think you might only take one message out of a whole book, but that message could be really key in a situation. And as a person, I think I'm constantly reflecting on what I do, the conversations I have, how I have them. I've been looking at doing some NLP training as well, so that I can, have really good, effective conversations. How I ask questions, when I ask questions, what sort of questions are they? But also, most importantly, I ask for feedback from my players, because if I'm not giving them what they need, then I'm not doing my job. And if I'm being too hard at times or too demanding, and sometimes they need also need to be able to sense what the players need at certain times. Sometimes it's about having a bit of fun with them and recognizing their emotional needs sometimes are far greater than the football needs. So I'm constantly striving to be a better coach, but also most importantly as a person, because that's who they want to play for. They want to play for somebody that, I think inspires them, drives them, and that they can buy into. And obviously, I think, I'll be honest, I think parenthood changed me as well. It softened me a little bit. My players will probably say not, but I think it helps me, because I have to be so patient with my children, that I think that then helps me in my coaching, be a little bit more patient as well. So anything I can do to develop, I'm always looking for something that can make a difference.
Yeah. I can, just listening to you, I'm just hearing emotional intelligence, that you're investing, a lot into your emotional intelligence, which for me is the key to success in not only in business and sports, but in life. It's, they say it's not about the IQ, but it's about the EQ, your emotional intelligence. So, do your kids play?
Well, we play out in the garden. They before all of this, they were going to a Sunday morning club, which when I'm not training on, or we've not got a game, I go and watch. And I love to just go. I don't want to be one of them parents that's on the sideline shouting. I just love to go and watch, say nothing, watch them have a lovely time, ask them if they had fun, and that's it. So yeah, my little boy's getting more into it now. My little girl's quite good, but just unfortunately not that interested. So yeah, they play a little bit. They love being around the team, and it brings, sometimes I have the kids in work, it brings a little bit of normality to the workplace as well. So yeah, they love being around it. If they play, great. I just want them to be active, so I'm going to give them loads of opportunities to play loads of different sports, and it's up to them then to choose what they want to do.
If you could give any advice for sports parents, what would that advice be? Especially, let's just say kids of 10, 11.
I think if they're already in the sport, just support them. Just make sure they get to practice on time. Ask them if they're having fun. Maybe ask them what they learn. I think don't try and coach them. Don't give them a negative experience in the car on the way home. Be okay with making mistakes, because that's absolutely how we learn. They have to make mistakes, and it's important that they do. Allow them to fall over, because that's how they learn to put their hands down. You want them to make mistakes. You want them to learn. You want them to grow. And I think give them opportunities to try loads of different sports rather than specialising too early, because sometimes you can get to 16 and be bored of one sport, and actually multi-sports gives them lots of different talents as well. So I think most importantly, don't put any pressure on them. Don't be a parent that screams on the sideline. Just be a parent that just supports and is just there to say, well done, did you have a great time? Right, let's go home and have a sandwich. I think that for me, I never had pushy parents, and it was brilliant.
Now, obviously, you mentioned you invested in yourself with listening to podcasts and books. Any good books that you can recommend out there?
Yeah, I'm reading one at the moment called Radical Candor, which is brilliant. It's all about having the difficult conversations, how to have them, and I think it's based around business, but it's so transferable to sport, and some real life examples of in there of when people have got it right, got it wrong, and just a really, really good book. And then I'm obviously gonna to plug your book that I've found fascinating in terms of the 7 keys to being a great coach. I think you've done some amazing research, and there's so many things in there that I relate to, and also things that I think, right, okay, if I can think about how that I can adapt that to what I'm doing, I think it's a great book. And then there's another one that I find fascinating called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
And I found that book really, really fascinating on how, they believe that criticism is futile and how you have to have a conversation with people and how you get their buy-in. And so, yeah, 3 books that for me I definitely recommend.
Thank you, Casey. Your check is in the mail.
No worries.
Well, here's the funny thing. That book was written. Was it now 4 years ago, 5 years ago? I have this theory in life that you change every 5 years. Obviously, if you're a lifelong learner like I am, I love to wake up like you, and I'm hungry to learn. I'm hungry to understand more. I read. I do all these things. But if I read my book again, honestly, I'd probably change 50% of it.
Would
And
you?
yeah, because the experiences I've had in the last 5 years, there's certain areas I've changed my mind in, and that's and I'm okay with that because it shows me that I'm learning, I'm growing. And I don't know if you've heard of the author John Maxwell. He's brought out I think 30 books on leadership. He's probably one of the best teachers in leadership. And I was listening to a podcast of his as well, and he said his publishers asked him to change one of his books that was written 15 years ago. And in his contract is that he had to change 20% of the book. And he said he read the book and he said, "This is terrible." And this is a book. This is a book that's a New York Times bestseller, over 2.5 million copies sold. And here's an author that's reading his book going, "This is terrible." And he ended up changing more than 80% of the book. And it gave me a little bit of peace as well because and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Casey. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago.
Oh no, we evolve, don't we, with the experiences that we have and what we learn, and we should. If we don't grow, then what's the point? I think that means you're not open to learning, you're not open to change, and I want to be better. So I'd be really disappointed if I was the person I was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I know, because you just said there it's so important to get yourself out there, to have conversations with coaches, with leaders, with other people, because that's what helps you grow and learn. It's like our conversation we had in Manchester. After that conversation, I went back to my room and I wrote notes of what we'd spoken about, because it's so easy to forget those, and I still look at those and the conversations I've had with people, because those are things that I eventually write about again, because I've learned something.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're all different, aren't we? And got different, and I think those shared experiences are so invaluable. And it's like when you go and watch coaches work, I always say, even if I don't take the session, I might take their manner, I might take their tone, I might take the way they communicate and relate to their players. So there's just so many different things you can learn from other people, and that's probably because we like learning.
Now, I want to be respectful of your time, because we had quite a lot of questions for you that came through on social media, and I want to definitely get to those as well. But bit of a fun question. If you could have lunch with 3 people, who would they be and why?
Yeah, a bit of a random mix, but I went for kind of 3 leaders, obviously in different fields. So I went with Nelson Mandela, because he's obviously an incredible human. I'd love to obviously get some insights. I went for Alex Ferguson, because I think what he did at Manchester United was incredible, and to be able to evolve and constantly change things and produce so many winning sides is, legendary. And I went for Michael Jordan, because I've obviously watched his documentary recently, and I just find him as a competitor absolutely fascinating.
Well, it looks like we're probably going to be having lunch together, because two of those are mine. Coincidentally, is Nelson Mandela. Obviously, I was brought up in South Africa, so that's why it's close to me as well. That I lived during those years of when he was released in the 90s, and it was just a fascinating time to be, obviously to be in South Africa. Of course, Alex Ferguson as well. It's probably in my top 3 books is his book Leading. And even though this as well, I'm a lifetime Liverpool fan, always been a massive, massive fan of Alex Ferguson and his leadership. And then my 3rd one, this is probably going to surprise you, is Lance Armstrong.
Oh, okay.
Because I mean, hands down, regardless of the drugs and so on and so forth, he's still probably one of the best athletes ever, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
just phenomenal. So I think those would be three interesting people. So
Interesting.
yeah. All right. So I had some questions on social media from a few people, and thanks so
Yeah.
much to everybody who sent those in. First one comes from Sean. If you could build a version of a perfect footballer in a lab, what would be the 4 most important attributes, physical and or mental, and which is most important?
Mentality would be right up there in terms of a winning mentality, because I think you win every day. You don't just win on a Sunday. I think speed is really important in football. I think game understanding and tactical awareness is really, really important. And obviously looking at technical, I'd have to say somebody with the ability to go 1v1, because I don't think there's that many players in the game, especially in the women's game, that really, expose people in 1v1 duels. So they're kind of the 4 things that I'd love to have in a player.
Our next question comes from Natalie, and she gets straight to the point. Who are we signing this summer?
Yes, I know Natalie. She's one of our avid supporters. And if I let that away, then she wouldn't be so angry with me all the time. So I'll keep my cards close to my chest on that one.
I thought so. Right move. The tennis advisors, they sent a question saying, does her team use analytics and strategies like in tennis? So probably the GPS and all those type of things.
Yeah, we definitely use GPS. All the players have even got their GPS now whilst they're training remotely. So yeah, we definitely use GPS to monitor load, to make sure that we're exposing the players to the thresholds they need exposure to before match days. Obviously, we use data in terms of analysis from I don't think data always gives you the full picture, but it can give you an idea of what you're seeing, support it or challenge it in terms of the data from the analysis department. Players always have their GPS data. I'm not a big fan of like passing stats and stuff, because I think they only tell you one thing. So if I'm a centre half and I pass to my other centre half, I can have 100% pass stats, but I've not hurt the opposition. So, if we're going to do stats, I like to look at forward passing stats and how many lines they've taken out, etc. So we do use them. We give the players what they need. We keep what we need. So yeah, we definitely use them, but not to probably a greater degree that tennis would.
Millie asks, what are your expectations for next season?
I think we'll obviously set out our targets as we go back in at pre-season. We've targeted a top half finish this year, so to finish 4th, albeit prematurely, was pleasing. But we know at this football club, it's about winning. It's about striving for more. So we'll be looking to better that next season, and hopefully we want to try and bring some silverware back to the club.
Andrew asks, ask what she thinks about putting chocolate in the fridge.
Right, so yeah, I did see that question.
I've no idea what. Yeah.
I'm going to disappoint him and say I don't actually really eat chocolate because I'm not that much of a fan. I actually prefer it in the fridge. If I'm going to eat chocolate, I prefer it to be cold rather than sticky and stuck to a wrapper.
Yeah, I'm the same as well. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's something about personality. So I'm probably going to have to ask Andrew if there's some science behind it. I don't know. Anyway, Valentina asks, how does she and the coach staff prepare a week of training and the pre-match?
We're quite methodical about what we do in terms of the footage that we'll show the players on the opposition to then prepare for training. So if we're working on an out of possession day, we'll show the opposition in possession what their threats are. We'll then work on our out of possession stuff. Our schedule is pretty set. Our themes for training obviously change week to week depending on who we're playing against, but also in line with our principles and the way we want to play. And obviously the pre-match, I don't do an awful lot on the day of a game, because if I'm doing it on the day of a game, it means that I haven't done my job between Tuesday and Saturday when we continue to train. So it's just key messages to get them in a good place. Just make sure they're nice and calm and they know their jobs, their roles and responsibilities, but no real tactical information on a match day, really. It's just key reminders from what we've been working on during the week, and just making sure they're in a good place to go and perform.
Interesting question from Karthik. I think it is Karthik.
Yeah.
Which player do you think has the most winning personality? Talk about putting you on the spot.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like asking, what's your favorite kid?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd like to think all my players have a winning mentality because they're at Man United, and that's something we really pride ourselves on is trying to win football games. So, but I have to say, we have absolute nightmares in small-sided games because so many of them are winners, which is great, but it all kicks off all the time. And I'd say Jess Siggs was probably up there. And Katie Zellermith, they're not on the same team. They're an absolute nightmare because it goes on. It goes into the dining room. It carries on until, and they live together as well. So I can't imagine it's great when they get home. But I kind of allow a freedom of that because I think it's great. I love the competitiveness that we've got in our environment.
One more from Karthik. I hope I'm saying that right. Is another one. What do you see in the future of women's football? Now that could be another podcast, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah, where do we start? In the current climate, if I'm honest, I don't know, because I think this could have a huge impact on the women's game financially. But I've seen a definite growth over the last 6 years, huge growth in terms of the World Cup last year, the exposure, the fact that, people are tuning in their millions to watch England play is fantastic. So I think we have to protect the game in the situation we're in now. It's crucial. And that we keep the wages at a place where it doesn't become not sustainable. So yeah, we've got to continue to grow it, but I think it's got to grow at a rate that the game can cope with.
Another direct question here from Ricky. He asks, is she looking to add experienced European players this summer?
Again, I will keep my cards very close to my chest. Obviously, we look to improve every year. So, we're looking at players to bring in to make sure that we can compete.
And then the last question here from Adam. My question to Casey would be, what would be her opinion on if there should be a reorganization of the Conte Cup in the future, or is she happy on how it's being currently structured?
Well, obviously, we're guided very much by the FA on that. It depends on when we're able to start back next year. It might mean the Conte Cup has to change format. I quite like the group format because it gives us more games. It gives me opportunities to give players more minutes. And then when it goes to knockout, you have a different stimulus for the players then in terms of being under pressure and having to win on that night. So I quite like the format that it's in now. In terms of giving us more minutes. So I would probably leave it as it is, to be honest, but I'd probably make sure that it was played midweek and not at weekends.
Awesome. And thanks everybody for sending in those questions. So, all right, moving on to the final part, quickfire questions. It can be one word or a sentence. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Favorite food?
Thai.
Oh, okay. Favorite drink?
Red wine. Am I allowed to say that?
Of course. Any particular?
Quite like a Malbec.
All right, so just saying that just in case any players have, upset you, they know which wine to get you as a gift, right? Okay, so Malbec, Manchester United ladies team, Malbec.
Yeah.
Guilty pleasure?
Crisps.
Ooh. Favorite movie?
Pretty Woman.
Favorite book?
Do you know what? I like the Harry Potter ones.
Okay. Favorite female athlete, can be past or present?
Serena Williams.
Favorite male athlete, past or present?
That's a great question. Michael Johnson.
Okay. Favorite sports team besides your own?
Wow, that's a great question. Ryder Cup team.
Okay. Tea, coffee, or protein shake?
Coffee.
Favorite city, destination that you've visited?
Vancouver.
Favorite sports team growing up you supported?
I'm going to get in trouble now. Arsenal.
Justin Bieber or the Jonas Brothers?
Oh, neither. Bieber.
Pet peeve?
Lateness.
And favorite quote or saying?
People might not remember what you did or what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. I think that's right.
I like that. Okay, so as expected, you have not disappointed. This has been a great conversation, and it's easy to see why you've been such a success. Final question. In your opinion, what does it take to be champion-minded?
To strive to be the best in everything every single day.
I like that, short and sweet. If anyone out there wants to follow you, what are the best ways to do that, Casey?
I'm obviously on Twitter and on Instagram, and my handle's pretty simple. It's just at Casey Stoney. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm that entertaining on Instagram. It's more about my kids and stuff, but some stuff about the team too. So yeah, if you want to give us a follow, that'd be great.
Awesome stuff. Casey, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on. I've loved it. Brilliant. Thanks.
So guys, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did chatting to Casey. Remember, this podcast is available on YouTube and on iTunes. Connect with me on social media on Twitter at Allistair McCall, on Instagram Be Champion Minded, and on Facebook Allistair McCall page. So as always, remember, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded.